What is so mysterious about China? If we get to know each other better, the mystery will disappear.
I wanted to make this film to make the American people and the Chinese people, as distinct from their governments, stakeholders in what is arguably the most important bilateral relationship in the world. And clearly right now, we're at a pivotal inflection point in that relationship. So there's no more important time than now to have an informed citizenry. I think if you look at the documentaries and this was made by Westerners. My director's British, I'm American. I think if you look at the films historically that have been made on China, certainly over the last decade, they've been very focused on the human rights issues, natural disasters, and I felt there was a lot more that the American people and needed to know about China, and the Chinese people needed to know about America. Let me just state the obvious. The American people know a lot less about China than the Chinese people know about America. You know, there's a natural tendency to fear what you don't know, and this is why people need to be educated, because if they're educated, then they can make an informed decision. Right now, the knowledge base is so low about China that I feel fear takes up all the public space. And I think we've seen that in the last couple of years accelerate. Well, in the interview that we did with Henry Kissinger, he says, and I'm paraphrasing, he says, if the United States and China were to clash, it would be a disaster for the whole world. And so we must look at the relationship as an effort to make the better angels of our nature prevail amidst a maelstrom of events. And when he said that, resonated with the director and myself, and we decided on the spot that that had to be the name of the picture. Well, okay, let's start with China first. I think the Chinese don't truly understand that the America that Xi Jinping, your president, saw 30 years ago is an America that still exists today. It's an open America, an accommodating America, an America that is interested in hearing solutions from people outside of their countries. And I think that's one of the most important takeaways for the China side, because I think if they understand this, the Chinese people will try harder in America, and I think that's a good thing. On the American side, I think the most important myth that exists is that the economic relationship between China and the United States is a zero-sum relationship. Americans have seen the exodus of middle-class jobs, and they've seen China gain middle-class jobs as a result of that. That's part of the process of globalization. And I think they haven't been schooled or properly understood the fact that in the next phase of globalizations, that middle class that's developed in China will be the buyers of our goods. So the gift that America gave to China, which is markets, is a gift that China is about to give back to America. And I think even if China was not to open its market any further, in other words, it would stay exactly as it is right now, which is unlikely. I think they will open. It's almost a certainty over the next 5 to 10 years as the roughly 600 million middle-class Chinese consumers come on tap, that China will supplant both Mexico and Canada as the #1 export destination for American goods. So for the first time in a generation, the American people have the real prospect of winning back some of the jobs we lost from China. I think things in general, of course, have deteriorated over the 5-year period, especially in the last couple of years in the U.S.-China relationship.
They take our money. They take our jobs.
There are some people in this country who would like to make China an enemy. I've always said about that, well, hell, the best way to find an enemy is to go looking for one.
And I think that just speaks to the importance of shattering the myths that do exist. We talked about the economic myths, but there are a lot of other things that Americans don't understand about China. On the economic front, I think the average American doesn't understand that there's been a real dark side to globalization for the Chinese people themselves. Let me just cite 2 things. First of all, China has experienced its own disruption of its labor force as middle-class jobs have moved to Southeast Asia and Africa. So the exact same thing that has happened to America is happening to China. Secondly, way underreported in the West is this concept of the so-called unattended children. There's over 60 million children in China, just 20% of the child population of China that grows up, without a mother or father because they've moved to the city or to, in some cases, another country in order to find work. This is a part that's not really understood. I mean, people see the enormous wealth. They see the fact that China has lifted 600 million people out of extreme poverty. And in such a short period of time, I mean, it's a historical miracle, the renaissance of China. It's a historical miracle. And I think when that becomes the headline, the other parts, the cost associated with getting there, are not well understood. And if they were, I think people would have more empathy for China. So this is a message that needs, I think, to get out in order to prevent understandings. I like to say that globalization is agnostic with respect to its victims. It gives and it takes with both parties. And I think to the extent more people understood that, I think there would be a basis for moving forward and cooperating. Critical is to increase the knowledge base and to specifically to shatter the myths that Americans have about China and China has about America. I think if you don't take these first steps, I think it's very difficult for the policymakers at the government level, the state-to-state level, to achieve the objectives that we want to achieve.
Diplomacy is like a game of billiards. Somebody thinks they're going to hit the ball and make it go into a pocket across the table. What it does instead is hit a lot of other balls along the way.
As George Washington said, if you have public opinion on your side, you can do anything. Without it, you can do nothing. I'm optimistic because I think if we can get around the misunderstandings, I think the fundamentals of the economic relationship are extraordinarily strong.
We are different people. We're proud people. In so many ways inextricably connected, and yet are also deeply suspicious of each other. It's like the world's worst buddy road trip comedy. And the question is, how do we get past that suspicion?
We are better together than we are apart. We need to double down now on the level of integration between China and the United States right now.